What's going on, Meat Mafia? Welcome back to another episode of the Meat Mafia podcast. Before we get rolling here today, we want to give a quick shout out to you, the listener. We are so thankful to have you on board with the Meat Mafia, and we cannot thank you enough for your endless support. Without you guys, we are nothing. So thank you so much for your comments, feedback, likes, subscribes, listens, everything. It means the world to us. With that being said, please go to your podcast medium's platform, give us a 5-star review. If it's not 5 stars, maybe don't give us a review. Subscribe, do the whole thing. We really appreciate that. And also, please go check out some of the links below. We have some great sponsors, and they are killing it in the world of food and providing great high-quality food for people just like yourself. Quickly outlining our sponsors, we have Holy Cow Beef, Rick Ranches, Equip Foods, and the Carnivore Bar. These are all great products. If you want to learn more, go check out the links below. Without further ado, here's a word from our sponsors. Holy Cow Beef is a regenerative farm based out of Lubbock, Texas, with humanely raised grass-fed, grass-finished beef available for sale and shipment. Companies like ButcherBox source from outside of the US and Australia and don't specifically have the American Grass-Fed Association, or AGA, label, but Holy Cow does. They also sell chicken and pork in addition to their amazingly high-quality beef raised right here in Texas. Alden and Ann Warren have overcome their own health struggles, and they have inspired us by the way they live their lives and by the way they raise their animals. So go check them out in the link below, and they also accept Bitcoin, so all you Bitcoiners out there, go check out Holy Cow Beef. Also, if you're in Colorado, go check out Rick Ranches, a grass-fed, grass-finished regenerative farm servicing all over Colorado. He also accepts Bitcoin, so all you Bitcoiners out there, go hit up Rick Ranches and get your beef today. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Carnivore Bar. The Carnivore Bar is an animal-based, shelf-stable product with only 3 simple ingredients: beef, tallow, and salt. The bar is inspired by the ancient traditions of Native Americans who needed to create pemmican bars to preserve meat for long-distance travel. The Carnivore Bar is perfect for animal-based athletes or busy people looking to follow a low-carb diet. It's easy to throw in a bag and take with you anywhere you're going, whether it's a workout, hike, or even packing it for a snack at work. I throw them in my triathlon bag and take down a bar immediately after working out. They're a fantastic product, so go check them out and use our discount code in the link below.
All right, we're live with another episode of the Meat Mafia podcast. We are joined here with Krisna Hanks, where we connected on Twitter a few weeks ago, and we've been going back and forth. So very excited to have you. How are you, Krisna?
I'm great and very honored to be on your podcast. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we've been both Clemenza and I, who's unfortunately unable to make this episode, we've both been getting a lot of value out of your Twitter. We think you have an amazing perspective. And I saw that you just sent me that blog post on the performance mindset. So we'll link to that in the show notes, but I definitely want to check that out too.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a long background in the performing arts, but the performance mindset is something that's kind of dear to my heart for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we would love to dig into that because I know in your Twitter bio, you're listed as a certified nutrition network coach. And you've been digging into the low carb, high fat, ketogenic space for, I think, since 2007, maybe a little bit before that. And we know you have a great background as you were a professional dancer. You also were plant-based for 20 years. So we think that there's a lot of good stuff that we want to dig into. But yeah, I think we'd love to learn a little bit more about your background and kind of how you ultimately came into the low carb, high fat space.
Absolutely. So just a bit about my background first. I grew up in the Midwest in a town called Quincy, Illinois, about 50,000 people. Also, as a health coach right now, I have to say right from the start about my background, both my father and my brother, my father being Cheryl Hanks, my brother being Mike Hanks, we're basketball coaches, both on the collegiate level as well as the high school level. And my brother was also a coach internationally. So coaching is something that has been inspiring me throughout my whole life there. But my Cliff Notes version of my background, I was a professional dancer. I started getting paid for dancing about the age of 15. That lasted quite up until my over 40, right? So I had 30 some years as a professional dancer. which took me to companies in Chicago, Akasha Dance Company. I got started with a Midwest Ballet regional company called Pamela Bedford in Illinois, went to New York and ended up in the Netherlands working for 2 decades in the Netherlands. That's why you might hear a funny accent. Yes, I do speak Dutch. Had a fabulous end to my dance career there. And along the way, I've always been involved in some kind of movement, obviously teaching dance and being a professional dancer, but I'm certified in about every movement modality. Probably I'm certified in Pilates, Iyengar yoga, senior fitness. And due to my own sort of health interest in the nutrition, which I'll get to in a little bit, I did all of the Nutrition Network's, the Noakes Foundation courses. And just recently, this past year, finished their sort of top level program, which is a coach practitioner, which means you have to complete all of their programs in addition to doing the special coach training in the low carb ketogenic lifestyle. And my academic degrees, I have 2 degrees from Indiana University, bachelor's and master's in kinesiology. And then I received my master's in business education, my MBA from the University of San Francisco. So as my parents might say, I'm a lifelong student.
Yes.
Of everything.
Which is so awesome, because there's so many people that just, they decide, you know, when college is done, their learning pretty much is over. But I think you're the perfect example of that. Is like, if you're passionate about something, the learning really never stops. There's always more that you can learn.
That is so true. And the more you dig in, I really have been sort of passionate about the nutrition, particularly the low carb lifestyle. The more you dig in, the more you feel, oh gosh, I'm just scratching the surface.
Absolutely. One quick thing I wanted to ask you, do you feel like your coaching style is influenced by being raised by basketball coaches?
Certainly. You know, my personality is shaped by them, my beliefs, and also both my father and my brother were very successful. But I think maybe the biggest inspiration is that people who worked with them, players, even assistant coaches, staff, all felt that they were inspired by them, right? They inspired them to be the individuals that they are, right? Obviously, the things like discipline and wanting to be educated were, you know, sort of core principles there, but definitely highly influenced by them.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. And one of the things you mentioned too is the your background as a professional dancer. For a listener that maybe isn't as familiar with professional dancing, how rigorous is that physically?
I would say it's as rigorous as a professional athlete, right? We have similar training schedules, right? Day in, day out. You're, let's say, going in the morning, going to class. Most of us would go to ballet class. In the afternoon, you're rehearsing, and in the evening, you're probably giving a show. So it's a pretty, you know, rigorous, not only in training. Then you have that coupled upon, you might be on tour with a production. You're also, you know, when you're in one job, you're sort of looking towards what's your next job. So you might be going to auditions. And it requires a high level athleticism, right? It's every bit, I think, as demanding, both mentally and physically, as a top sport athlete. Again, personal opinion.
Personal opinion, unbiased. Yeah, no, no, it's absolutely true. And I think you'd mentioned that one of the things that's really unique about you is that you were doing the plant-based diet for 20 years, two decades. When you were a professional dancer, were you doing the plant-based diet then when you were competitive?
Yes. And a lot of what got me started into the whole vegetarian route as a professional dancer was one of the things of being on tour. You know, it was always the challenging of when can you eat and how can you eat. I was known for taking like lots of stuff with me. You know, I had a bag bigger than me. I'm 5'2", weigh around 100 pounds. So not real big.
Yeah.
And because you never know exactly where you're going to be or where you're going to be able to get. So I went down the route of vegetarianism thinking, well, this might be a route that works for me, also being on the road a lot. And there were a lot of other people doing it. You know, as you can imagine, dancers, we have to deal with the whole stigma around, right? We should be tiny, we should be thin, right? And that wasn't really an issue for me, but you're certainly concerned about your body image, right? And at that time, I thought, well, maybe this will work for me. I stayed with it for close to 20 years, right? And I don't know if this is the point where you want to go in that direction, but the reason I stopped was at the end of my professional life, and I didn't get injured or anything and said, I must quit because I'm injured. I put a stop to it because I was ready to stop. I was looking to do something else. I started doing some executive coaching, and I just felt I needed a change in my life. However, why I stopped being vegetarian had to do with my health. And for close to what I would say 2 years, I started suffering from what I would call debilitating joint and tissue issues. So remember this, I just winded down a long professional career, height of being able to ask my body to do anything and it would do anything for me, right? It was really at peak level in that way. And then it just seemed like it sort of got on a roller coaster downhill, straight down. I would have, I first started noticing that if I would sit and then try to stand up, it would be a painful experience, right? That, you know, I was living that time in Amsterdam, you're cycling a lot, stepping on and off the bicycle, just my legs would feel weird, my spine. So it started first in the lower back, then went outwards towards the hips, then went upwards in the spine. And I got on then what I would call the hamster wheel of medical rounds, how is to say it, you know. One doctor would say, oh, you have some kind of rare autoimmune disease. One would say, oh, you've got rheumatoid arthritis. It's just manifesting itself differently and we can't put our finger on it. Someone would say you've got chronic fatigue syndrome. I mean, it was just one thing after another. No real conclusions. That was about a 2-year experience. And then the sort of two crucial points that came. The first was a physical therapist by the name of Ted Williamson, who, by the way, he's sadly no longer with us, one of the most fabulous physical therapists in the Netherlands, specialized in dancers. He and I were having dinner, and he said, have you ever thought about your diet? But, you know, vegetarian, you know, is pretty like, you know, closed-minded that, you know, I bristled up. I was like, no, can't be my diet. My diet's perfect, right? Yeah. I've got this all under control. I've been doing it 20 years. I've got it. I went home that night and then I thought about it. So first thing that next morning, what I did was I called him and apologized because I felt I'd been very negative, and I had. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna give some new things a try, right? Because that was the only person who ever said to me after all that time anything about nutrition. Now, not one medical person, nobody said anything. And I think that has a lot to do with the stigmatisms about I'm small, right? I'm petite. I don't have a weight problem. So my nutrition must be okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
But obviously it wasn't, right? I had gone from being able to do anything with my body to being able to do this like limited amount of movements. It was crazy.
Insane.
And so I started real simply just adding a little bit of meat here. I was in the Netherlands, adding, a little more fish back in, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And within a week or so, things just started to change. It just, the brain fog, all the various things. I just had that epiphany that, nutrition is so powerful. And I have no idea, dance is very demanding, it's very physical. Maybe the restrictiveness of the diet coupled with the intensity of the athleticism of dance, the two just depleted my body.
Yeah.
I don't know. But at that point, I just knew that there was no going back, right? Unless I wanted to be unhealthy for the rest of my life. When I was pretty good, my stage, I'm 60 plus now. That was 40 plus. And then the other epiphany that came was in 2002. My husband, Robert, read the article, "What If It's All Been a Big Fat Lie" by Gary Taubes. And that just, again, second kind of epiphany of saying, what I think I did as a vegetarian was when I took away the meat and all those other things, I replaced it with a lot of carbohydrates. The Netherlands is a bread culture. They have wonderful, fantastic bread. I was eating lots of pasta, lots of rice, lots of bread. And probably, I would say I was pre-diabetic. Very, very, very good chance.
Yes.
Right. But nobody looked at those numbers or asked anything about that.
Which is insane, because you're 5'2", 100 pounds, and a professional athlete. Yeah, and you're clearly very health conscious. I feel like most people that go plant-based and vegetarian, they are health conscious. They just don't necessarily know the right way to do it. And I think I heard a statistic. I think 80% of people that are pre-diabetic don't even know that they fall into that condition.
I would definitely believe that, right? I certainly think I was one, and I know Professor Noakes talks about, his pre-diabetic journey as a marathon runner, right? I wonder how many of those are as well. But certainly, I think in the different groups of us, if we don't fall into the overweight or obese category, we still can be metabolically ill.
Absolutely. 100%. So for you, was it the physical therapist, Ted, that ultimately convinced you to start incorporating some animal protein back into your diet?
Yes. Yeah. And he was just a very special person, by the way. And he would watch dancers all the time. Right. And, he saw us all through the age spectrum and things that we were dealing with. And I think had that kind of holistic approach that, that might work for somebody. It might work for somebody who's 20, but for somebody who's 40, heading towards maybe menopause or those kind of things, it wasn't working for me. Right. And he was the only one who really dared to even speak about it.
Yeah. Well, he sounds like he was a really special person and clearly had a huge influence on you and a lot of other people. So you start to incorporate more animal protein, and then your husband comes across Gary Taubes' article in 2002. And did that just further encourage you to incorporate more saturated fat and animal products into your diet?
Yes, absolutely. And then, he came out with the book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, I think around 2007, which really dug into the science. And I would say, between that article and then his book, we just dove down the rabbit hole of researching this. And also a little sort of interesting side note, I was living in the Netherlands. My parents were still alive in Illinois, and my brother and also his children and family were also in the United States. And every time I came back to the United States, I felt like people looked worse. And it wasn't just that they were, that weight was an issue. It just, they looked in a lack of energy, right? People seem to be aging really quickly. It seemed that just things started to make sense about the really large consumption of carbohydrates and obviously sugar, and the body processes them both the same, so it doesn't matter in that way. And that was also just something that kept kind of like a wheel kept playing of what's going on here. You know, I'm seeing it from a different lens, living outside the country.
And it's a really interesting perspective that you had, because, you know, clearly you and your husband, you're incorporating more saturated fat, you feel fantastic, all of your inflammation is going away. And that's what's so interesting with people that dig into this diet. It's like you're finally giving your body these like bioavailable micronutrients that it's been craving for years. And you just respond so positively. Like you mentioned, the inflammation goes away, the brain fog goes away. You're packing on muscle, even though you're not really necessarily changing your workout program. And then you go in a Western society and people are just eating diets that have no nutritional value at all. You're starting off your breakfast with, you know, toast and oatmeal and orange juice and pizza for lunch and, you know, something refined and processed for dinner. And it's like your body's just craving nutrients. So like when I lived in New York City, I would see that all the time, where like when I first started going down the low carb rabbit hole, like I was popping up at 5 a.m., you know, drinking like a bulletproof coffee and having 2 pounds of meat for the day, feeling the best I'd ever felt, where all my people are just sluggish and they're not smiling and there's no energy. And that's the opposite of how we're supposed to be as humans, right?
Oh, I totally agree. And, you know, when I was living in New York, sure, I was also at that time also a personal trainer. I was getting up at the ungodly hour of 4:30 in the morning, you know, and, you know, what would I go do after I'd go to a session was have a bagel or something like that, right?
Yep.
You know, and then I wondered why, you know, would crash, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like you did this rigorous like 45-minute workout routine, and maybe you burn like 400, 500 calories, and you're like, oh, well, I've earned this bagel. And then the bagel's got, you know, 40, 50 grams of carbs. It's got 600 calories. And it's like with one bagel, you basically just gave away your entire workout, but you think that it's fuel because that's what society and these dietary associations has taught you what you're supposed to be eating, right?
No, I think we're, and I'll be forever grateful to Gary Taubes, right? And I will say that always, is the real eye opener of the fact. And I saw it also as someone instructing people in different movement modalities, is eat less, move more. Doesn't work, right? And I would see it even on people who training for marathons or training for triathlons. And during that whole training process, just keep getting bigger and bigger, right? Meanwhile, they were exercising more and more. And you think this sort of, what do you call it? Plan, it's just, it doesn't work. And then when you see you can dive into the research and you start to see people can make real changes, right? Just by someone who opened the door and said, you know, the hypothesis might be something else.
Absolutely. I know that I completed my first Ironman this past fall. And I'll tell you, like with my ulcerative colitis and, you know, digging down the carnivore keto rabbit hole, my stomach is just too sensitive to a lot of these gels and carbs and sugars. And I basically committed myself to the fall. I want to do a half Ironman, but I want to do it either completely fat adapted or off of a carnivore diet. And because I know Pete Jacobs, who won Ironman Kona in 2012, he's actually gone carnivore because he had really bad autoimmune issues and does his races fat adapted. But short answer is my stomach just can't take all the nutrition and the sugars and gels. And I'm like, you're training for this thing, but it's actually not even healthy. It's actually detracting from your energy and the optimal version of yourself. So I completely agree with everything that you're saying.
Yeah. And I think, you know, one of my key, like about the blog post Performance Mindset is to help people understand food and nutrition should be about performance. It's not about punishment or reward, right?
Yes.
And maybe also, particularly for my female friends, and I grossly generalize here, not everybody, I want to say that, but we've sort of been pushed into this idea of, oh, you know, we should only have the salad, right? Or we should only have that little small portion of protein, right? That everything should be restrictive and what I would call almost punishment, right? And then if we're really good, we lose a couple pounds and then we get the reward, right? And when you can pull yourself away from that and think, what foods give me maximum performance, right? In other words, if you eat 3 meals a day, well, I'm kind of more in the 2 meal a day person, but whatever, right? Your lunch should carry you to dinner, right? You shouldn't have to have, 3 or 4 snacks in between, right? Which is what I was doing when I was eating a lot of carbohydrates because I was always hungry.
Yes.
Right. And there's a difference between hungry and hangry. And I was more hangry, right? If I would come out of a rehearsal, it was like, don't mess with me till I get some food because I might just bite your head off, right?
Yes.
Starving, right? And that's the glory of this lifestyle is food is performance. It sustains you, right? You don't have those mental swings like that.
Does it drive you crazy when you hear coaches telling women that they shouldn't be eating too much protein or lifting heavy weights or a lot of those misconceptions?
I think it's so unfair. I don't know how else to say it. And really what I try to do when I'm coaching people is say, do you want to be strong?
Yeah.
Right. That's a simple yes or no. Right. And we know with the rates of osteoporosis, and I think probably similar to your pre-diabetic percentage, I bet we have osteopenia, they want to call it, that's what they want to call it when you're in those pre-stages, but that probably is an even larger one. And we know hip fractures, the frailty issue is something, just look at Peter Attia, right? He's got the whole longevity.
Yes.
Series going on now. But I think women in particular are under eating when it comes to protein. They are under when it comes to resistance training, right? They are losing more muscle mass than even just maintaining, not even talking about gaining some, but maintaining. And that's something I hope to try to change a little bit. And, I know there's a lot of fear within the female community. I don't want to bulk up or I don't want to, you don't have to bulk up. You can just aim for a level of strength that is good for you. But that's got to include some lifting weights and a real good focus on getting your protein right.
Yes. And no, that's spot on. And speaking of protein, Krisna, what foods have you really built the template of your sustainable lifestyle and diet around?
Well, it's changed. First I would just say, in the very, very beginnings back, let's even go back to 2000, was really just focusing on minimizing the carbs, right?
Minimizing carbs.
Minimizing that. Minimizing the sugar. Also, the Netherlands is a pretty sugar culture. A lot of people still put sugar in their coffee and all that kind of stuff. And then I sort of evolved more into going what I would call lower carb, right? And at that time I've always been a little hesitant about tracking and calculating. That just seemed too scientific for me. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a life experimenter. But I think I was probably in that range of probably, 60, 70. And then it seemed like the lower carb I went, the better my energy got. So I would say I'm pretty, if you want to classify keto as down in that 20 carb range, which I think I'm kind of around that right now, probably, right? And as I've gone up this low carb ladder, I've gone more and more meat-based. I would say the bulk of my protein quantity, if I'm, striving somewhere around 80 grams of protein, 90 grams of protein, and some people say I could even be up to 100. I've heard a lot of people talking about that these days as a number to strive for. Could be, but getting the majority of that from meat, eggs, primarily beef, pork. Chicken is the lowest one on that. I don't feel that chicken gives me that as great an energy as the lamb, the beef, the pork. Substances. And I have to throw in that I am a lucky individual because my husband Robert, besides being in this low carb path with me, is an amazing cook.
Oh, love that.
And he's also pretty much carnivore. So I think you have to have the support system in your house as well. I work with a lot of individuals who struggle because everybody in their house wants to do something different. And it's just really helpful. I think that if you find someone that you can share your nutritional sources.
Absolutely. Shout out Robert. What what is his favorite, what is your favorite dish of his that he makes for dinner that you just absolutely love?
Oh, well, I could say his pan fried steak is to die for, you know, in some good old butter, sometimes I think he fries it in a little bit of fat of some kind. That's a real good one. Tonight, he's making a Serbian dish, which is called sevapčići, which is these sort of little small, like meatball things, but they're a little spicy from the Balkan. Pork chops with onions. I can go on and on.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And that's actually, it's a good point because people get so worried with low carb carnivore about the variety. And it's an evolution of everything, right? Like when I first started, I was baking chicken thighs and pan searing steaks and making ground beef, very simple stuff. But now it's like, there's so many good recipes. There's all these different ethnic variations, like you're talking about with different herbs and spices. It's like, you can make steak hundreds of ways that taste so delicious and different. I think that's a really good point that you just hit in on.
Totally. And I talk about this with individuals I work with is, when it comes to variety and do you put the same standards on going low carb and keto as you did when you were eating tons of carbs? I mean, people I know who are very carb centric, they eat on a regular basis pasta, and they eat on a regular basis, some kind of rice dish with their toast in the morning. There's not a lot of variety there.
Yeah.
Do you expect more variety on the other side? And I so agree with you. I think it's Mark Sisson or I believe it's him maybe, or that did one time, he did like a matrix, right? Of all the meats, all the fish, all the veg, and that you could have like all these combinations of 300 to 400 different combinations if you just worked within that matrix. Swapping a meat with a veg or, something like that. So I just think, keep it simple, and I think at the end of the day, most people have 4 to 5 dishes that are kind of their go-to dishes. And then, when you're feeling inspiration or you've got company, you want to do something, you go do some other recipes and you just kind of recycle them with some varieties, One we've been playing with is the sheet pan keto burger, right? How many variations can you make on that one?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's great. And I think what you're thinking of is, I know in Rob Wolf's book, Wired to Eat, he has like a whole matrix in the back of the book.
It is Rob Wolf. You're right. Yeah.
And it's so true.
Rob Wolf.
And he gives all these different combinations and different spices and sauces. And, now there's brands like Primal Kitchen and Noble Made that it's almost like the more of the dressing or sauce you put on it, like the healthier it is. I know that was Mark's intention. So I totally agree with you. And I also totally agree with what you're saying about chicken too. I don't eat a ton of chicken. There's this local farm in San Diego, this local ranch called Tallow Ranch, where I'll source my chicken from. But I really just try to not buy it from the supermarket, just because pretty much every chicken in the supermarket is fed corn and soy and is like pretty inflammatory. And I've also just noticed you touched a lot on like beef and lamb for you. I'm the same way. I just find that it sits so much better in my stomach than chicken.
Yes, I agree. And, we have this kind of barometer in our house because Robert, my husband, is a little bit prone to allergies. I mean, those, again, that's a whole other story for him. But going carnivore and low carb really like pretty much wiped out the allergies, but he can always sense it the first in the chicken if there's corn in that. You got to get this little sneezy, watery eye thing going. You go, okay, yeah, all right. So that's easy to see in that way. And one thing that we just did, with the whole inflation and the food prices going up, we just bought a half a cow from a local farm.
Yes.
And a deep freezer. So we're super excited about that. And, can't wait to experiment with all the different things and support our local farmer.
Which is amazing because, like, number one, it's probably averaging out to like $4 to $5 a pound, which is so much better than anything you'll get in a grocery store. And then secondly, it's like that farmer has a relationship with you and your husband. He or she is incentivized to take care of you and your family. Whereas like you're basically faceless when you're going to a supermarket, and there's all these different loopholes and restrictions with grass fed versus grass finished, where you could pick up a pound of meat in the grocery store and it's labeled grass fed, but they can still be finished with like these total mixed rations or candy, but can still be labeled as grass fed. And you don't even have a way to verify it. Whereas like with this farm that you're purchasing from, you can literally just talk to the rancher and they'll tell you exactly how they raise their cows. No antibiotics. They can tell you about the lineage, the parents. It's just like a total different level of autonomy with the food, right?
100%. And I think it's so important in this because, I know I was probably extremely dogmatic, and I applaud my mother for bearing with me for 20 years, because I will say that we were raised in the Midwest with just good old fashioned food. We even, as growing up, we didn't have the space in our home, but my parents rented a locker space. There was this community locker. So people who hunted and game, and you could go, I think it was even called Russ's Locker. I always remember this name for some reason. I'd be one, we have to go down and pick it up. But then she bared with me through my vegetarian episodes very kindly. But that hadn't been how I grew up. And one other little anecdote about that. My dad was born in 1925. He was a US Marine at the age of 17, went to World War II, served in the Pacific. He even knew that then, and it just, once I started going down the low carb, it came back to me, is he understood that if you ate potatoes and drank beer and bread, you got fat. He said that was something they talked about in the military, right? That those people who needed to so-called lean up were supposed to remove the white stuff, the potatoes, the bread, and not drink beer. And I thought, think about how far we came from that, right? That was thinking that people understood until the sort of, we won't even go into the whole Ansel Keys and the fear of saturated fat, and that all swept across the country. But there was early on mentality that understood a little bit more about carbohydrates.
Absolutely. Yeah. Your father, I see all these pictures now that have gone viral on Twitter and Instagram they'll show you the contrasting picture of like the average beachgoer in the 50s when your dad was probably 25 to 30 versus now. And it's like every person looks like they're either in shape, skinny, not a lot of fat on them, versus now it's like, I think it's like 7 out of 10 people are overweight or obese. And it's like, all right, well, what did we do in the meantime to get to that point?
It's actually tragic, right? And I think Nina Teicholz, and I applaud her also for her great research and scientific exploration of saying that people have really followed the guidelines, right?
Yes.
And maybe because I was living out of the country, I felt a little more freer then to change my mentality. I didn't get sucked into the whole low fat sort of thing. You know, the Netherlands always had great cheese and that kind of culture, strong dairy, farmers and farming, although that's also under attack right now too.
Yes.
But you know, people did what they were told. And now it's really hard to unsee it, right? They you know, and I think women still fear fat. They fear protein. There's just a lot of fear that we need to help support them in finding other choices. Right?
Absolutely.
I think if there's anything that I can hope as a health coach is that I empower people to do more research, to experiment, to say, you know, I tried that. Like me, I tried that for 20 years. That should be enough.
Yes.
Right. And trying this made such a difference. Right. And to get beyond the idea of it's about a number on a scale. I think to impress upon people that metabolic health is really what it's all about. Right.
Yes.
And even, I know you're in San Diego. I'm in close touch with an old high school friend of mine who's a doctor in San Diego. And he I've been kind of guiding him along his journey.
Yes.
He played basketball also for my father.
Oh, awesome.
And so in his journey too, you know, he not too long ago, he texted me to say, yeah, you know, I'm under 220 for the first time in 25 years.
Wow.
But more impressive is his metabolic health. Right? You know, weight is one thing, but you know, where you see people really change is that, you know, those 5 metabolic markers, right? They lose inches around their waist, their blood pressure goes down, their triglycerides go down, right? Their glucose stabilizes, and you know, it all, you know, starts, you know, their HDL goes up. So in terms of metabolic health, you know, they start to score an A.
Definitely. Yeah, it's amazing. And has this doctor, has he mentioned, does he think that he may be speaking to his patients more about nutrition after working with you and seeing the results that he's had?
You know, that he's a pediatrician.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's a whole, but I think people impress upon people through walking the walk, right? I think not every healthcare professional is in a place where they can feel comfortable or confident in having the conversation. But I think what you see more and more people is asking questions, right? For instance, I was lucky that my physical therapist dared to ask me, right? And that is what I hope more and more people, like you've got in San Diego, Brian Lenski speaking out, you know, Dr. Robert Lustig is speaking out, right? The list is kind of endless. Asim Malhotra in the UK, right? You know, there's on and on when it comes to also, I think here in America, just a side note, one of the most impressive people, I think, from the female side is Dr. Georgia Eade, who's now at Smith College talking about brain health and why the brain needs animal fat. And she's working with young college students, right? I've already mentioned Nina Treischholz, Zoe Harkob, you know, Amy Berger. I mean, there's a lot of people speaking out. Not that those ladies are in the medical field, but I think it's becoming, the confidence level is rising. Let's hope.
Yeah, which is amazing. It's like any other movement, right? Back in 2002, when you and your husband first came across the Gary Taubes article, you know, people thought that eating more saturated fat is crazy. And now we're sitting here almost 2 decades later, people like you and I that have had life-changing effects from it. There's so many people that have reclaimed their metabolic health, like you're talking about, through this movement. And it's just continuing to gain more momentum, which is fantastic.
Yeah. And one player we haven't mentioned who's been in this field a long time is the Weston A. Price Foundation.
Absolutely.
Right? When we
Yeah.
talk about saturated fats, Sally Fallon Morell, I mean, I would say, their book, Nourishing Traditions, also was a kind of game changer in our mindset. Obviously Taubes and the whole, investigation on carbohydrates and sugar, but reading those recipes and understanding the role that traditional foods have played in people. Weston Price, his investigation, into dental caries and why, I know he used the not politically correct term of primitive peoples, but let's just say native and traditional cultures, and how none of them had dental caries, right?
Yeah.
When they stuck with the traditional foods, and a lot of those were very saturated fat based and meat heavy, and they thrived until we brought in, the white bread, the sugar, and all the other sort of bad characters from our sort of Western influence. So I think they're also still doing good work, right?
Yes. Yeah. That book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, is incredible just from the power of the images alone. And I know a bunch of them have been shared on Twitter, but like you mentioned, a lot of these native tribesmen, you can see their jaws on their natural diet, and they have like these chiseled jaws, near perfect teeth. They're not using fluoride or any Western dental care. And then they show you the after pictures, like you just said, of when they're reintroduced to this Western diet. And it's like, because of all the soft foods, their mouths literally shrink, their teeth get all crooked. And you look at, just the average person in the United States, and it makes so much sense. Something you touched on before, Krisna, that I think is really important is it's like the overemphasis that we place on the scale. And I've been working with one of my friends. She told me that, she had been trying to bulk up, and basically sent me the foods that she was eating and told me that she felt extremely lethargic, bloated, didn't feel great. And it basically came down to, like, I just looked at her diet and I was like, I think you're just eating too much processed dairy and carbohydrates. So I got her onto like a modified kind of like animal-based diet. And after a few days, she responded and said, my gut feels so much better. My energy feels great, but I lost a pound on the scale. And what I said to her, I was like, all I want you to do is follow this diet for 2 weeks and don't even look at your number on the scale. Just focus on how you feel and how you look in the mirror. Is that something that you sympathize with as well? Is that an approach that you'll have with your clients? I'm just curious about that.
100%. So definitely the onset of my work or working with anyone, whether it's individual or group, is improving metabolic health. And what I've seen, I've been, I did executive coaching for about 20 years. I've been doing health coaching for, 15, and there's an overlap in those years, is particularly in the women. Often you will see them lose inches before they lose pounds. And Dr. Eric Berg says, I love this quote from him, is you have to get healthy before you lose weight. And I think by our obsession with this scale, right, we lose sight of what's actually changing. For many people, and I'm going to say a good majority of women, you will start to feel it first. Your pants will feel a little bit different, right? So I think a better measurement is your waist to height ratio, right? And good research is showing right now that that's definitely, we know BMI is a lousy indicator, right? We can maybe just put that one in the trash pretty much. But waist to height ratio, even the conservative CDC uses waist measurement, but it's pretty, they give you a lot of room on that. But I think that's a much better indicator. And it's also something people can track, right? I think that you see results there sooner. It's also a better sign that you're really dealing, in my opinion, with the visceral fat. And that's not indicated on a scale.
And is the best way to get your waist to height ratio? I mean, obviously, you know what your height is. Just kind of like take a tape measure and put it around your waist without pants on, and just see what that is, that circumference is.
Right. So, for the marker of metabolic syndrome in the United States, they used a waist measurement of 35. It should be 35 or under for women, 35 inches. For men, you guys get a break always. It's 40 or under, right? But most people are saying the waist to height ratio ideal would be that it's half, right?
Okay.
That you're half of that is a good indicator. And there is some little bit of, you know, discrepancy. For women, what they usually say is put your hands on your hips and go up to that narrow part. For men, they're most likely say just drag it right across your navel, right? Not squeeze it, so, you know, but just, you know, a little taut like you would, like if it was your pair of jeans or something like that. And that's a great place to start. And, you know, I think it also keeps people understanding that this is about metabolic health. Right?
Yeah, no, that's an amazing piece of advice. And I know Dr. Philovadia talks about that in his book, Stay Off My Operating Table, but that's definitely something I'm going to promote to people as well. Like if you do like the feeling of just tracking and having the data as opposed to obsessing over the number on a scale, you know, which can fluctuate a few pounds just based on your sleep and fluid retention, try the waist to height ratio. So you at least have something actionable that you can track maybe once a week. Is that what you recommend for clients? Something like that?
You know, it really depends on the individual because again, with a lot of individuals, I know women who have for their whole life gotten up every day and gotten on the scale. And you know, I have a little personal anecdote about that, but I think it plays with your psyche, right? And because let's say, you know, you just drank a lot of fluids the day before, or right? And we know that weight can fluctuate a couple pounds up, a couple pounds down. And what does that do to start your day, right? If you're having a down moment on the scale. And I think that most people would say, you know, if you're changing your diet, give it a couple weeks, right? To sort of see results, right? You know, I know many programs, whether it's Sisson or Paleo with Rob Wolf and them, you know, they look at markers like 21 days or 30 days. If it's somebody who's been incessantly tracking, you could go to something like once a week, right? I just want to always make sure that I'm protective of people who have been obsessing about the scale, right? That they pay more attention. You know, we have things we call non-scale victories. Energy, brain fog, sleep, right? How was your workout, right? Do you have, you know, energy left at the end of the day, right? All those kind of things. So there are some non-scale victories as opposed to the metabolic health victories.
Got it. No, that's incredibly important. When you have a client that's transitioning to a lower carb approach, are there just major tips or tricks that you think about? Maybe it's like sodium consumption or making sure that you're cooking the majority of your meat. Like, is there anything that you tend to go to with someone that's maybe going from the standard American diet to a ketogenic or paleo approach for the first time?
Well, I think the first piece, one of the pieces that people need to always be mindful is exactly what you said, is the sodium, is the salt. You know, again, it's one of those pieces that everybody is fearful of, right? They're afraid, you know, they've been told not too much salt, it's bad for you. And, you know, I always refer out to Dr. Ken Berry. I love his little video on 7 signs you might be deficient in salt. You know, it's simple, right to the point. Is that, you know, we're also fighting this, you have to have, you know, 8 glasses of water or how many gazillion things, you know. I saw PD Manigan this week posted, you know, drink when you're thirsty. Right? Is that if you are really, as you do when you start low carb, you tend to urinate a little bit more, right? You're losing a little bit more fluids. So you're also going to be losing a little bit more sodium, right? Along with that, right? Is to really watch your, whether it's electrolytes or salt balance. You know, I love to be simple, is salt your food to taste, right? If you notice that you're feeling a little bit more lethargic, then you maybe need a little more, or maybe you need to supplement with a a good electrolyte, balance. There's some good, I see you've got one right there.
Element, yes. That was not intentional, but
yeah, I know. And I don't get any residuals from any of them,
yes.
right? Either. That is something to really watch right away at the beginning, right? Because that changes and that happens pretty quickly. And I think it's that focus on get your protein right? However many meals you're gonna, whether you're 2 meal a day, 1 meal a day, 3 meal a day, prioritize that protein, fat fortify your meal, keep an eye on that hydration.
Yeah, no, very simple. Sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah. No, and I just wanted to caveat, hydration doesn't mean just 8 glasses of water, right?
No.
It means the sodium piece, the electrolyte piece.
Exactly. And if you're probably just drinking straight water, you're flushing, you're not even really retaining those fluids for proper hydration.
I agree.
Yeah. I'm a pretty salty sweater, and I found that like an element in the morning before I have my coffee, and then one in like the afternoon or like right before a workout, plus salting my meals typically works for me. And I'm like 190 pounds, but like you said, it all just depends on your activity and just how you are as a person. If I'm going to do more endurance and it's hot out, maybe I'll throw in an extra element or 2 elements, but the 2 packs of that seems to work pretty well for me.
Yeah. And I think it's been, I had a client who was moving from a very heavy consumption of diet soda, right? Like 13 a day.
13 a day. Oh my gosh.
And an extremely stressful job, incredible stressful job, working in a hospital. And getting the hydration piece as she transitioned from into the low carb was really, really important, right? And again, you've got all these multiple factors when you're working with people, how much stress they have, are they good sleepers, right? Are they heavy sweaters? So I think, making sure that piece amongst the other factors that you really need to balance with people is important to keep an eye on.
Yeah. One of the things you just talked about with your client was stress. How important is stress management when you're working with clients?
Well, I tell you, in the Noakes Foundation courses, there's one quite amazing doctor, Dr. Kajay, Dr. Hasini Kajay, and she's an integrative medicine doctor, and she's a low carb lifestyle doctor as well. She says it's 5 things that you need to control and you need to work with people. Manage stress, manage stress, manage stress, manage stress, manage stress. So I'm heavily influenced by that, but I think that is the piece where as a health coach, we have to work on very consistently. Because all the research shows if your cortisol's up, right, you're storing fat, right? You're in the fight or flight. So whether that's a low grade cortisol lift or a high grade one, right, it's still hard for your body to burn fat at that case. Couple that with women who are in menopause, right? They're losing estrogen, right? We've got other factors. So I think it's huge. And I think it's figuring out how to manage that. But I will say, by changing your diet, right, you by nature get yourself right off the hangry wheel.
Yes.
That's one. That's going to help lower the stress, right?
Yes.
That starts to make the other pieces more manageable. Again, my perspective.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I haven't had any bad colitis flare-ups since I've switched to like a carnivore animal-based, low carb approach. But a few weeks ago, I started noticing that I was having this like excessive bloating feeling in my stomach, not pain, just bloating. And I could feel it like instantly when I started eating my meals. And we had on Dr. Mary Kerr, who's she's board certified, like holistic health practitioner out of Dallas, Texas. And after we stopped recording an episode, I told her about some of the symptoms, And the first thing that she had said to me, she was like, well, are you normally stressed? Are you more stressed than you normally are? And I was like, yeah, I actually am. I never even thought about that. And one of the things that she was mentioning is that because my body was stressed, it was like shuttling energy away from some of the digestive functions. So she had prescribed a digestive enzyme in HCl. And then I was just started doing like more meditation, was prioritizing sleep. And then just from those factors, like the bloating went away a few days after that. So it's like perfectly in line with what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we all process stress, differently, and there's a certain amount of stress that is good. Obviously, we need stress on our bones and muscles and that. And figuring out, much like we've all tried to figure out now what our carbohydrate tolerance is.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have a higher tolerance for carbohydrates actually than my husband Robert. He has a really low tolerance, right? He gets allergies and different kinds of things. But we all have a certain tolerance for stress, right? And some maybe it's much higher, and you have to figure out whether it's breathing and meditation that's going to work for you, or getting the right exercise. And here's a little piece, something that I see a lot recently is over exercising, what Mark Sisson calls chronic cardio. People who are doing cardio 6 or 7 days a week, like, especially for those of us who are older, that's that's a lot of stress.
Yes.
Right. And I know, in the Primal Health, they talk about, he talks specifically about chronic cardio, but I think that also leads to this chronic, a lot of stress in the body. You also see people who have struggled them with weight because, the body is constantly being taxed and put to the test, maybe too much.
Yeah. And to your point too, it's like, I see it, you see it all the time at the gym, people that are just, you can see them on the treadmill. They're there 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week, and they're doing zone 3 cardio too. Right. So they're not going hard enough to get that response that we want. So they get faster, but also like they're not going slow enough to stay in that steady zone 2 state where your body's actually tapping into its fat stores. It's like zone 3, which is the worst of both worlds. And most people just get caught in that repetitive nature on their knees. What I found is I've done a lot of running. It's just the mental benefits of like a good cardio workout are almost addicting, which is why you want to do it. But to your point, it's like, it's not the most optimal thing for your health.
Yeah. And I think what you touched on right there, it's that addictive nature. People really get off on the high that you get from it. I was a runner for a time. After, it was a great release, from stopping dancing, where you're high level, you get that adrenaline kick and that. And that, I think, again, I'm not a scientist. I think Doug McGuff in the Body by Science, his book, right? He really goes way into what is really cardio in that. But definitely for my age group, right, this 60 and above, a couple days a week, maybe doing strength training. I know Mark Sisson advocates for, 1 day of doing some sprints as opposed to doing all this constant cardio. And then supplementing it with, different movement modalities, right? Like I do a little bit of Pilates, right? I definitely do a lot of hiking so I can get my outdoor, that you've got this variety where you're challenging your balance, you're challenging your coordination, but you're not stressing it, right? By constantly being on the treadmill or the elliptical or anything that is repetitive day in and day out.
And one of the things you mentioned before too, is that you're in your 60s and you feel better than you've ever felt. How important are just like exercises for longevity, or like for anyone that's starting to like get to a similar age group? How important is it to have that mindset?
I think it's everything, actually, really, right? I do solidly feel like you really have to get your food right. You really have to get the nutrition piece sorted out, right? That's foundational, right? And whether it's improve your metabolic health or get to a better weight or find something that doesn't continually push you up and off the roller coaster. But I think the next piece is figure out what movement modalities work for you, right? Where's your affinity? And also what is then gonna keep you strong? My brother is somebody who lifted weights his whole life, right? He had a gym in our garage when we were kids. And he's still doing it. And he's, in the next decade, and he looks fabulous, by the way. That took me a while to figure out, coming from the dance field where everything is thin and long and, but if you want to be strong, you have to figure out the strength training piece, right? And then you have to kind of figure out what are the things also to just feed you inspirationally and get you outside. We're here on the computer. There's a lot of all of our lives as a coach. I'm on the computer a lot, those kind of things. We need that vitamin D and that. So that I feel I get the double with the hiking on the weekends when I'm not working. And this morning I just, it was like 105 here right now here in Tucson with swimming. How fun is that?
So fun. So good for your joints and your back. I feel like when you get out of the pool, it's like a combination of cardio and strength training.
Yeah. And I think it's keeping some possibilities, having this sort of routine. And, something that I have is I have a few little what I call go-to maintenance routines. So I obviously coming from 3 decades as a professional dancer, I've had some hip issues, right? That having a little routine of things that you do for your maintenance, like whether it's your hips or your back or your knee, that you have a few that you kind of just weave through during the week, like you would if you were brushing your teeth. And I know that sounds maybe like a long list of things, but really, I work full time.
Yes.
Right. And, I often will take my work lunch break. I'll go work out for 30 minutes, eat my lunch for 15, kind of chill for 15 then.
Yes.
Right. It is making, and that's where maybe my father's influence, my mother's influence, my brother, my husband is, you got to plan.
You got to plan.
I say to all my clients, if it's not on your calendar, it's not going to happen.
100%. That's such a good point. And even too, like you were talking about being on Zoom calls and coaching calls all day for even just someone that's working like a corporate 9 to 5, if you have these these informal one-on-one catch-ups with people, like take them out, turn it into a walking call outside and tell your coworker, hey, why don't we both go for a walk and catch up on the phone? They'd probably love that. And you can get, 30 minutes, an hour worth of steps in while you're doing your job.
100%. I have a standing desk at work.
Yes.
And I love it. Right. So if I'm on calls, I try to mix it up. I'll sit a little bit. Maybe if I'm on a call, if I want to take notes, stand up. I love my standing desk. It's definitely a game changer.
Absolutely. There is also something, I definitely feel it because I have a standing desk as well. I literally feel more productive when I'm standing to do work. And I know that if I take my laptop and go sit on the couch, it's like almost like a death sentence for my productivity.
Yeah. Agree.
Right.
Agree. Yeah. Right. And that gets back to that whole, in 2010, I was invited to this fabulous conference at Stanford University, which was on the science of sitting, right? That might not be the actual, but it was super fun in that it was the conference where you couldn't present with a PowerPoint. You could only present by chatting. You could have your notes if you wanted, right? So everything was much more conversational. Also, they had stand-up tables and different things around. And I got introduced to somebody from Australia called Neville Owen, who was doing a lot of research about the detrimental effects of sitting. I actually wrote a white paper on sedentary behavior from that. But he, kind of coined that term, the active couch potato.
Yeah.
Right. Where, people who were like marathon runners and maybe even people doing what you're doing, Ironman kind of things, who were clocking ungodly amounts of hours exercising and doing all kinds of things. But no matter how much exercise they did, most of them were college students or working in tech. They were sitting 8 hours a day plus 10 hours a day. That the negative effects of the sitting outweighed the benefits of their exercise.
Yes.
And that got that whole thing, that sitting is the next smoking, all of that. But fascinating research anyway. But definitely, I think if you can just find general movement in the day, it's always going to be a big win.
That's such a good point. It doesn't matter how hard you smoke yourself during your 45-minute, hour-long leg day. If you're just sitting on the couch or you're horizontal, which most people do after a hard training session, you would be so much better off, doing 10-minute walks after your meals, or just constantly standing or being active. That adds up way more. Most people, are probably getting less than 5,000 steps a day, which is just not going to cut it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's the little boosts. I call them physical renewal moments. For instance, just get up, move your spine, change your position. And that seems like, that gets that low level of what's it called? METs, the metabolic equivalent of task.
Yeah.
Right. Where you get at least a 2 to 3, right? We know fitness is much higher up on that. Those kind of things are beneficial, at least, is helping your metabolic health.
Absolutely. Krisna, what is the best way for someone to go about connecting with you further if they want to learn more about Square One Fitness and they're interested with working with you? Is Twitter the best place to connect?
Certainly. So Square One Wellness is my Twitter handle. Also the website, Square One Wellness, right? I'm pretty active on Twitter, or that is, as Tim Noakes said in my graduation of the coach practitioner, I think Krisna was my first Twitter follower.
Wow. Love it.
So I enjoy that. I think it's a great space, particularly for the low carb nutrition. You can see conversations and sort of get an idea of what people are doing in there. A little bit on the Instagram, also Square One Wellness there. Facebook, Square One Wellness as well. And same for our website. Yeah.
Perfect.
And also on LinkedIn.
And LinkedIn too. Yeah. We'll link to all that in the show notes. I think we'd also love to put in a link to that white paper as well that you were talking about with sedentary behavior, because that's fascinating. But yeah, just wanted to thank you for all the work that you're doing in the space. I know that this conversation, I personally learned a ton, and hopefully we can find sometime, whether it's like Arizona or California, to be able to link up in person and hit a steak or something like that. That'd be great.
Absolutely. I would love that. And thank you so much for what you're doing of promoting this and, supporting women in the low carb community, keto community, carnivore community. We're sort of all together here. And health coaching isn't for everyone, but some people really benefit from having a coach.
Definitely.
And I think if nothing else, I hope to empower and educate them to find their own way, right? And that, we can all support each other as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, it's such a good message. And it's like, we're both so passionate about it because we've both had our own life-changing experiences, and we both wouldn't be where we are today without, the diet and nutrition and lifestyle. And the goal with what we're both doing is we just want to spread the message and help just change as many lives as we can. So it's really powerful stuff.
Absolutely. And thank you again. It was an honor to be on here, and keep up the good work that you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Krisna. This is great.